all of this kind of brings me to, if we sort of return back to this little outline, to why we might want to think about not Keynes, but Antonio Gramsci. What can we learn from this, sort of conundrum that the American elite is in if we're not actually part of the American elite? If that's not our job, we don't have to fix America. We could be thinking about maybe just fixing the world or, something modest. Maybe we could be thinking about the things that people who were actually voting for Barack Obama, about hope and change and, a world that has no racism, a world that has no poverty. Maybe we can try to imagine those things. Because one of the things that the American, the recent election period has done is it's opened up some possibilities of, it's cliche to say hope and change, but on the other hand, if it's coming from the office of the President of the United States, maybe we should think about hope and change. Maybe we should redefine what kind of hope and what kind of change is possible. And this is where I think thinking about Gramsci is significant. The basic argument that capitalism is a system inherently prone to crisis and based on a fundamental contradiction was one of the original ideas of Karl Marx. Now, a lot of Marx's ideas have been, they've been declared dead over and over and over again, and I'm not here to try to do any resurrections. But I do think that in terms of the contemporary world we're in, the notion of an elite that rules both with ideas and with corporate power and with the military at the same time is a very valuable way of thinking about another kind of world that we could imagine. And Gramsci is helpful in this. So if this new kind of world is necessary, it's not going to come from Obama and the Democratic Party of the United States. That's not within their job definition. That's not within their purview. It will come possibly from the social movements that were part of the civil rights movement and that had an unusual space in part of the American electorate that created a kind of battering ram to get Obama into power. There was a social movement element to the way in which the election took place. But once the election ended, there hasn't really been any independent organization from below that could continue that momentum with any kind of force. So we need to know there are some real limits to what's going on in the United States right now. Obama was against the war in Iraq, but on very limited terms. And it would be a mistake to assume that Barack Obama was a peace candidate. And if we do think that, then that's where a lot of the disappointment will come from. On the same day that the world was celebrating the departure of George Bush, and millions were dancing in the streets, literally celebrating Obama, the United States had actually organized a military attack on a number of Afghani civilians. And Obama's main criticism about the war, and this was in Afghanistan, main criticism about the war in Iraq was not that it was a military imperial activity that was subordinating innocent victims, but that there really should have been more militarization around the war in Afghanistan and less in Iraq. And in a certain sense, the surge that has followed Obama's presidency is consistent with what he had been arguing before. So this is a quote from someone who's not a radical, Jimmy Carter, former president of the United States, who maintains that one of the problems that Obama is encountering is that there's a normalization of attacks on people of color, of people who are African American, that is acceptable in certain parts of the United States. And it seems to me that this is an important component of what's happening, that there is a need to criticize Obama, but to criticize him in a context that is recognizing that he is also a creature of the civil rights movement, and that in Washington, D.C. itself, the traditional elite are not accompanied, they're not accustomed to listening to a black man giving them orders. There are very few opportunities in the United States where that happens. That is not the configuration of race and class that's normal in the United States. So here's a quote from Jimmy Carter referring to the way in which Obama has been criticized around the health policy. When a radical fringe element of demonstrators and others begin to attack the President of the United States as an animal or as a reincarnation of Adolf Hitler or when they waved signs in the air that said we should have buried Obama with Kennedy, those kinds of things are beyond the bounds. I think people who are guilty of that kind of personal attack against Obama have been influenced to a major degree by a belief that he should not be president because he happens to be African American. It's a racist attitude, and my hope is, and my expectation is, that in the future, both Democratic leaders and Republican leaders will take the initiative in condemning that kind of unprecedented attack on the President of the United States.